Hi everyone, my name is Rose Kelly and I'm here with
Naveed Sanatgar. This is our HES 434 Physical Activity Throughout the Lifespan podcast project, and today we are going to talk about infant sleep.
To give you all an outline of what we are going to talk about today, we are first going to go over some background knowledge about infant sleep that we learned in this class for the research that we've done on our own and in the Netflix episode on baby sleep.
And then after that, we're just going to talk about two specific scientific research articles where researchers conducted studies about various infant sleep topics.
And finally, we're going to apply all this knowledge and talk with an expert on the topic and her experience working in a daycare setting with infants.
And just to begin and give you some background knowledge, did you know that newborn babies spend about 16 hours a day sleeping?
Wow, that's a pretty long time. Yeah, during their sleep, their brains are very active and they tend to wake up every 2 to 3 hours during the night with no real specific sleep pattern. So, for parents, getting that recommended 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night is pretty challenging.
Yeah, that is pretty rough on newborn parents. And with that being said, you might be wondering why infants don't have a sleep pattern like us as adults do. Well, to answer that, it's kind of because babies don't have a circadian rhythm, at least not yet at that age where they're infants.
In the Netflix episode on baby sleep, researchers studied baby rats, and they found that the connections in their brains haven't formed yet to create a circadian rhythm. Therefore, they wake up and fall back to sleep multiple times a day, just like newborn babies.
That's really interesting. In the episode, researchers also found that during these short sleep times, their brains are moving their memories from short-term to long-term.
Yeah, in fact, they need to move those short-term memories to long-term more frequently because they have such a small hippocampus, which is a crucial part of the brain that encodes new memories and converts them into long-term storage.
Oh, wow. So when do they start forming these connections then?
Well, in the Netflix baby sleep episode, researchers at NYU studied this exact question. They used minute-precise data from all around the world and found that at 1 month, there was no pattern. Eating and sleeping was more random.
Around 4 months, an initial cycle occurred. And when they got to 8 months old, researchers started to see that there's kind of a hint that there's a pattern going on.
Yeah, and then at about a year, a clear pattern emerged and babies were starting to sleep throughout the whole night.
And just with this all kind of being said, we need to keep in mind that all babies are different and develop at a different time. No baby is the same as another, so though this was a large study, it doesn't mean it applies to all babies. We just need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, so now that you have some background knowledge, we're going to talk more about specific research articles that we read about infant sleep.
The research article that I found is titled A Qualitative Study of the Sleep Ecology of Infants Under 2 Years Old and Their Mothers in South Korea. And this article was published on February 28, 2022 by Sleep Health. And just to kind of cover the topics, the purpose of the study was to assess and understand different sleep patterns for infants under the age of 2 years old and how that kind of correlates with their mothers. And this was specifically done in South Korea. And the researchers really wanted to focus on how different patterns, such as cultural factors, technological factors, mental health factors, this includes anxiety, depression, and just multiple, this includes in these mental health, the purpose of this study was to assess and understand the sleep patterns of infants under the age of 2 years old, as well as how that connects to their mothers. And this research was specifically done in South Korea, and they looked at different patterns of cultural factors, as well as technological factors, as well as mental health factors such as anxiety and depression, and how these all together play a role in influencing the sleep of these infants. The methods of the study were focused on the researchers using participants to sample information from infants under the age of 2 years old and their mothers, as I previously mentioned. The participants were all from South Korea, and the study used data collection to record all of these various sleeping habits of the babies and their mothers. And the researchers analyzed the data to understand the correlation between these various factors in the quality of sleep of their mothers and their infants. The main results from the study were that mothers and their infants' sleep patterns are directly correlated. In other words, if a mother slept bad one night, their infant did as well. Mothers who also used smartphones right before bed had lower quality sleep, and this directly influenced their infant's sleep as well. Another interesting result that was found was that mothers who had higher anxiety levels at night because they were worried about their infants directly influenced their infants' sleep as well. This is due to cultural factors of mothers being maternal caregivers for their offspring. They really emphasize this cultural factor. Where another result that they found was that some mothers did not have an accurate understanding of their infant's sleep at night, which ultimately led to the mother having more anxiety. This is just a natural idea that you can become concerned of your baby and how they're sleeping, which will ultimately cause yourself to have stress and anxiety as well. Some major takeaways that we can take from this article are that mothers and infant sleep patterns are directly correlated. If the mother is sleep deprived, so is the child and infant. So is the infant. There's also a lot of cultural and societal norms that influence the sleep of infants. Some cultures have the mother prioritizing the child's sleep over their own, which can ultimately lead to increased anxiety in the mother. And if the mother is staying up at night because they're anxious about their child, the infant is most likely going to have poor sleep as well. Finally, if the mother uses a significant amount of technology at night, it will ultimately disrupt the sleep of the infant as well as themselves.
Wow, that's really interesting, Naveed. The research article that I found was titled "The Association Between Infant Sleep, Cognitive, and Psychomotor Development, a Systematic Review." This study was done in Montreal, Canada, and it was published on August 19th, 2024. In this research article, the purpose of the study was to condense and combine articles and other research findings to find associations during infant sleep that relate to their sleeping patterns, cognitive, and psychomotor development. It's already known that when it comes to child development, and more specifically brain development and maturation, sleep is a very important factor. In past studies, researchers have found associations between cognitive function in sleeping children and adults. However, there's been less studies and understanding of that between sleep in infants. In this study, they did a review. Researchers used a systematic search strategy and screened 7,136 articles. Of those, 22 articles met their criteria, and then they did a quality assessment. From there, they categorized the studies as either poor, fair, or good. More specifically, when looking at these articles, researchers looked at the number of study participants, mode of sleep assessment, sleep variables, age at time of sleep assessment, duration of sleep assessment, the type of cognitive and psychomotor assessment, the age at the time of the cognitive and psychomotor assessment. They also looked at study outcomes, comparing sleep variables and cognitive and psychomotor variables. And then they also looked at confounding variables such as socioeconomic status, maternal age at conception, breastfeeding status, etc. All of these variables they extracted. They were organized and grouped as a function of infant age at the time of the sleep assessment. To further kind of look at these articles and categorize them, they did a second classification. Within that, 101 associations were extracted from the 22 articles, and then they grouped those into 3 different categories, which is a significant association, a non-significant association, or mixed results. The results of this study was that out of the 22 studies, 2 were found exclusively significant associations between infant sleep and cognitive and psychomotor development. 2 found no significant associations, and 17 found mixed results. The main limitations of this study was that there were so many different variables and so many different results, and just so many different articles. It was kind of difficult for researchers to group each category. Researchers concluded that because the results were so mixed and that it doesn't really follow the finding that, sleep is associated with cognitive and psychomotor development, that it should not be a conclusion that infant sleep is not important for healthy development. Instead, it kind of emphasizes how there should be more studies done in the future. Overall, researchers concluded that they do not have sufficient data to describe a causal relationship between sleep patterns and development in early infancy. Researchers realized that these two developmental processes are in a constant evolution during early development, and they're highly, highly variable and are also largely influenced on biological factors and environmental factors, which are hard to take into account when combining all of these studies together. So, as I kind of said earlier, the major takeaway from this is to be able to conduct more studies and learn more to clarify presence or absence of this association. Now we're going to move on to where we're going to apply all this knowledge that we learned. And we did an interview with an expert on this topic. Her name is Brittany Ramirez. She is a lead infant teacher at KinderCare in Broomfield, Colorado. We'll be inserting clips of her responses to the questions that we asked her.
The first question that we asked Brittany was, what is your background with infants / how long have you worked with them?
I have been working with infants with KinderCare since July of 2015. Before then, I did babysitting for family members, so I've kind of have at least 15 years behind me of working with infants.
The second question that we asked Brittany was, at KinderCare, how do you measure or record their sleep, and what is the environment like?
At KinderCare, we don't really measure or record their sleep. We are just required to have someone back there while they're sleeping if there's 2 teachers. If there's only 1 teacher, that teacher is to be up and alert and checking on each kid while they're sleeping at least every 30 minutes or so. Their sleep environment is still part of the classroom, so nothing really changes. Per licensing, we're not allowed to shut the lights off, so the lights are on. There's other kids awake. We are allowed to play soothing music, but we aren't allowed to use sound machines or have the volume up at a high volume.
The third question that we asked Brittany was, do you notice a difference in behavior when an infant has less sleep than their peers, or compared to a day when they get more sleep of that recommended sleep time?
Behaviors when an infant hasn't slept what they usually sleep at home, they become more fussy. They can't really tell us that they're tired, so it's more just being fussy.
The fourth question that we asked Brittany was, what are some of the more common challenges you face when keeping infants asleep, or overall sleeping in general? I guess kind of what are the transitions that they have to face?
That is always a hard transition when coming from home, because most parents have their infants in a dark room with sound machines. So that is a hard transition for most infants and some parents, because they like their child to be well rested at the end of the day. That's probably one of the biggest challenges, is reminding parents that we can't shut the lights off. We don't have blackout curtains. There's other kids awake. There's still noise going. So that's difficult.
The fifth question that we asked Brittany was, how do you combat these challenges?
Going about that challenge is pretty much the same. I mean, you just have to have a lot of patience. Eventually the children adapt to it. It's definitely something different, and it may take up to a few weeks, sometimes even longer, but eventually they all get it. We don't always get the 3-hour naps that parents see at home, but we still are getting a pretty good nap.
Finally, the last question we asked Brittany was, with her knowledge and expertise, what are 3 pieces of advice or tips or just things to know that you would give a new parent when it comes to infants and sleeping?
My 3 pieces of advice are: 1, to live your normal sound environment. Don't block that out, because like I said, that's a huge challenge. It's okay if your baby isn't on a strict sleeping schedule because their body knows when they need it and they will sleep when they need to. My last piece is not to stress about sleep. They eventually make it up, whether that's maybe they sleep 30 minutes at home and an hour and a half at home, or taking a little bit of extra longer naps at home. It's okay, they'll eventually catch up on it. Just listen to your baby. They know when they're hungry, when they're tired. They still find their voice in letting their parents and caregivers know what they need.
Well, that concludes our interview portion with Brittany. I hope you enjoyed listening. Another important piece of information that I know from, I actually worked with Brittany and other infant teachers at KinderCare for a few summers and in the winter. But an important thing to know is SIDS, which is sudden infant death syndrome, which is something we actually learned in class. But to avoid this, you want to keep the baby's crib empty, so there's no excess blankets or pillows or little stuffy toys that could harm the baby or suffocate them. So that's something really important. Then also keeping the baby on their back when they're sleeping until they can roll over will also avoid SIDS. And then another recommendation that we also learned about in class is having the baby sleep in the room of a parent or a guardian while they're in that first year of their life. But from this interview, some 3 major takeaways is that 1, babies can adapt. So like Brittany was talking about how sleeping conditions at home can be very different than sleeping conditions at a daycare. Babies do adapt and they do kind of learn, when they can take naps and when they don't want to take naps. Another piece of advice, takeaway from the interview is that just to listen to your baby, like if when it's acting fussy or when it's, crying, constant crying, that can be a sign of maybe the baby needs something, whether it's food or sleep or maybe it needs to burp. These are important things to consider and to look out for. However, babies do sometimes cry just to cry, so, you never really know. Like Brittany said, they can't tell you what they want or if they're sleepy or tired or hungry. The third takeaway from this interview is to, just to take care of yourself as a parent. This is, the first year is definitely one of the more toughest on the parents and for the babies, but just to take care of yourself. Like Brittany mentioned that, these transitions aren't just a transition for a baby, but they're also a transition for the parents. So, keeping that in mind and keeping your health in check as well is very important. Just keep in mind, everything takes time and you'll slowly learn and, you do kind of develop patterns and understandings of your baby. I kind of know from experience, the first day I was working with infants, it was pretty intimidating and scary and I had no idea what the babies wanted when they were crying and stuff, but, you kind of learn the more you're with the baby, with, they're hungry, if they're tired, if they need a diaper change. They do kind of develop patterns, and especially as they get older, these patterns, like in the research studies that we've seen and we've talked about, that they do develop these patterns, and then you kind of create more of a schedule with the babies. Another kind of piece of advice is logging, when you changed their diaper, when you fed them their bottle, when they took their nap. That can kind of give you like a sense of, oh, maybe, my baby hasn't slept in the past like 3 hours. Maybe they need a nap, or oh, their diaper wasn't changed in the past 3 hours. Maybe they need a diaper change. So logging that information is also very helpful and beneficial, and something we did at KinderCare, which helped a lot too. With all that said, that concludes our podcast project. We hope that you enjoyed and we hope that you learned something new. Thanks for listening.